A man, let's call him D, is seen digging his way out through the wall of his cell. To help in this project, D has only the flimsiest and least reliable tools: 2 dessert spoons, half a pair of curved nail scissors, some domestic knives lacking handles, and so on. The cell wall, constructed from grey, squarish cinder blocks about a foot on a side, has been carelessly mortared and laid without much attention to detail. But this lack of artifice makes no difference. None of the knives is long enough to reach the last half-inch of mortar at the back of each block, and the more D uses them, the shorter they get. Each block must, therefore, eventually be loosened and removed by hand, a task which can take several months and which leaves him exhausted. His hands become deformed and swollen. After a decade of digging, he breaks through to find not the outside, but a compartment about 3 feet in depth, full of dust, mouse droppings, and bundles of old newspapers tied with string. Collapsed against its outer wall, he discovers the desiccated corpse of another man, surrounded by worn-down meat skewers, bent knife blades, and an artful device made by splitting and opening out an old metal cup. This man is huddled up with his shoulder and one cheek against the wall, as if in his last moments he was trying to push it over, or as if he had pressed his face up against it to try and look out through some tiny crack, the result of a lifetime's effort. His skin, which has a patient look, is as yellowed as the newspapers. Taking the corpse under the armpits, D drags it respectfully to one side, selects the best of the tools, and begins scraping where the dead man left off. Years pass. He's generally full of energy, but sometimes, when he wakes too tired or depressed to work, he'll spend half a day reading. In strong light, newsprint can go yellow and brittle-looking in an hour, giving you the eerie feeling that the news is already old. The events recorded, some tennis matches, a bombing, a fake suicide, seem historical and quaint, the people oddly dressed, their figures of speech as hard to sympathise with as their values. After a few hours, D thinks, all newsprint, and thus, in a sense, all news, looks the same. It looks like the paper with which someone lined a drawer 30 years ago. By the same token, the news of previous generations, the kind of news he is now forced to read, looks about 6 hours old. A decade of intense effort and focus enables D to break through the second wall. Disappointed to discover another musty compartment, another corpse with a puzzled expression and a selection of homemade tools, he sets about the third wall, only to reveal a third compartment, and then, after a further decade of work, another and another, until he has made his way through 6 walls, past the 6 dead men who can be said in some way to have preceded him. Like D, all these men wear the grey civilian cotton jacket in which they were arrested, over combat trousers with a beautiful, if rather faded, dazzle pattern of blues and browns. Their hands are as bruised and dirty, their nails as broken as D's. Their hair and clothes are equally impregnated with dust. But he is glad to see that each one has made some individual addition to the basic tool set: a cut-down trowel from the prison garden, a snapped hacksaw blade, a short length of soft, thick metal which he suspects began life as a fire iron in the prison governor's quarters. And though they are dead, some of them have quite satisfied expressions on their faces. They died, he thinks, doing what they wanted to do. Before he breaks through the seventh and last wall, Dee decides to see how his escape is progressing. So he makes his way back through compartment after compartment to the cell from which he started. Accustomed to living in the spaces between the walls, he's forgotten how relatively large and comfortable it was, with its white paint, its metal bed, keyhole toilet, barred window, through which he can still hear rumbling along the tail end of the afternoon thunderstorm. There's even a small shelf of books. Dee stops to touch the spine of Dino Buzzati's masterpiece, The Tartar Steppe. He takes it down and he riffles the pages, looking for the marked lines that he knows by heart. And then he opens the cell door and he steps out into the dazzling light and the humid atmosphere of the prison compound. The rain has already evaporated from the bare, reddish earth. High above, a kite patrols the air, all its attention focused on something that Dee can't see. It takes only a moment to walk around the cell block to the place where he expects to break through. Though he taps the wall here and there, and he bends down once to touch the mortar, he finds no sign of his own efforts, yet he still feels optimistic. Before he goes back in, he looks over at the wall of the compound itself. It's 6 or 7 meters high and featureless, but for some black stains. Once he's got out of the cell block, he thinks, he will have to start on that. It will be a new challenge. He's quite excited about the prospect. So he goes back inside and he starts digging again with renewed enthusiasm.